You're standing there staring at a cracked concrete step, a crumbling garage floor, a patio that looks 100 years old. You've priced the fix. You nearly fainted. Here's what I learned. $5 of the right mix turns almost any tired surface into something rock hard and waterproof that outlasts the house itself. This was ordinary knowledge once, and then it quietly vanished from every hardware aisle. By the end, I'll show you a formula written down in 1818 by a chemist most people never heard of, and you can do every bit of it in the home you already own, with your 2 hands and a bucket. I remember the exact moment this hit me. I was on my knees in my own garage, scraping up the third failed patch I'd bought that year, watching little gray flakes come loose in my hand like dead skin. $40 for a tub, and it hadn't lasted one winter. I sat back on my heels and felt like a fool. Not because the product was bad, because nobody ever told me why it was failing. And once I understood why, I couldn't buy that tub ever again. Let me tell you what I figured out on that cold garage floor, because it changes everything about how you fix a surface. When you slap fresh cement or patch material onto old concrete, it doesn't actually bond. It just sits there. The old surface is bone dry and covered in fine dust, and the second you lay wet mix on top, that thirsty old concrete sucks the water straight out of your patch before it can cure. The new layer dries too fast, starves, and turns to powder. That's why it flakes. That's why it lifts at the edges. That's why it fails every single time, no matter how much you spend. I didn't know that for years. I thought I was doing something wrong. I thought I needed a better product, a more expensive one, the one with the fancy label and the picture of the smiling contractor. But the problem was never me. The problem was that nobody sells you the missing step, because the missing step costs almost nothing. The old-timers had a name for it. They called it a bonding slurry. And it's the difference between a patch that lasts one season and a patch that's still there when your grandchildren own the place. Here's the whole secret, and it's almost insultingly simple. Before you patch anything, you paint the old surface with a thin, soupy mixture of Portland cement and water, with a splash of ordinary white wood glue or acrylic bonding liquid stirred in. You mix it to the thickness of pancake batter, you brush it on, and while it's still wet and tacky, still shining, you press your patch material right into it. That slurry does 2 things at once. It seals the thirsty old concrete so it can't rob water from your patch, and the glue in it acts like a molecular handshake, gripping the old surface and the new surface together so they cure as one solid piece. I tried it the next weekend. I mixed maybe a cup of Portland cement, a splash of water, a good squeeze of white glue. Cost me pennies. I brushed it on that same failed spot in my garage, pressed fresh mix into the wet slurry, and smoothed it over. That patch is still there. It has been through every freeze, every scorching summer, every heavy tire rolling over it. Not a crack, not a flake, and it cost me less than a cup of coffee. But here's the part that started to bother me. If it's that simple, and that cheap, and that reliable, why did I have to find it out on my knees at 50-something years old? Why isn't it printed on the back of every bag? That question sent me digging. And what I found goes back a lot further than my garage. Portland cement, the gray powder in every one of those bags, was patented by a bricklayer named Joseph Aspdin in the town of Leeds, England, in the year 1824. He named it Portland because when it cured, it looked like the fine building stone quarried on the Isle of Portland. That's it. That's the whole glamorous origin of the stuff holding up the modern world. But here's what got lost. In those early days, and for 100 years after, the men who worked with cement understood it the way a baker understands bread. They knew it was alive while it cured. They knew it needed water and time, and above all, they knew it needed to be bonded, not just dumped. I found old masonry manuals from the early 1900s that describe the slurry coat as a matter of course. Not a trick, not a secret. Just the obvious first step any competent man would do before laying new work over old. They called it neat cement, or a cement wash, or a bond coat. It was as ordinary as washing your hands before dinner. So what happened? How did something so basic disappear from common knowledge? The answer is convenience, and it crept in slowly. Somewhere in the middle of the last century, companies started selling us the idea that we could skip the steps, pre-mix this, just add water that. Ready-to-use patch in a tub. Each product promised to save you time, and each one quietly deleted a piece of the knowledge our grandfathers took for granted. And I'll be honest with you, I fell for all of it. Every tub, every bottle of miracle sealant. I trusted the label instead of trusting the method, and it cost me hundreds of dollars over the years in do-overs. But money isn't even the worst of it. The worst part is the dependence. Once you forget how a thing actually works, you're at the mercy of whoever sells you the shortcut. You have to keep buying. You have to keep hoping this next tub is the one that lasts. You've handed over something that used to belong to you. Now here's where it gets bigger than patching a step. Because that same bonding slurry, that same $5 understanding, doesn't just fix concrete. It lets you resurface almost anything. And this is where I stopped thinking of it as a repair and started thinking of it as a way to make old, ugly things beautiful again. Let me explain what I mean. Once you understand that cement will grip permanently when you bond it right, you realize you can put a thin coat of it over surfaces nobody thinks you can. A scarred wooden countertop, a dated laminate tabletop, an ugly plastic planter, a rusted metal table, a tired bathroom wall. There's an old technique the tradesman called a skim coat, or a micro-cement finish in the fancier circles, and it's just a very thin, smooth layer of cement-based material troweled over an existing surface, bonded down with that same glue and cement handshake. 2 or 3 thin coats, each one sanded smooth, and you have a surface that looks like polished stone, like something out of a design magazine that costs thousands of dollars installed. I did my own kitchen counter this way. An old, scratched-up counter I hated for a decade. I bonded it, skimmed it with a thin cement mix, let each coat cure, sanded it silky, and sealed it. The whole job cost me under $30. People come into my kitchen and ask what quarry the stone came from. It came from a $5 bag and a squeeze of glue. That's the $1 million idea in the title. Not that you'll get rich. It's that you can take a surface worth nothing, a surface you were about to rip out and pay to replace, and make it look and feel like money. The value isn't in the material. It never was. The value is in the knowing. But I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now, because I thought it too. You're thinking this all sounds fine for somebody with a big garage and a truck and a weekend to spare and money to experiment. You're thinking that's not me. I rent. Or I'm older and my hands aren't what they were. Or I don't want to buy a pile of tools and bonding agents I'll use once. This next part is for you especially. Stay with me, because I'm going to show you how to do the core of this today, in the home you already have, without buying a single specialty product. You don't need the fancy acrylic bonding liquid the stores sell in the small expensive bottles. Ordinary white wood glue, the kind you might already have in a drawer, works as a bonding agent when you thin it. You don't even strictly need that. Here's the truth almost nobody will tell you. The single most powerful, most forgotten step in the whole process costs nothing at all. It's water. Let me say that again, because it's the thing that saved me the most heartache. The reason patches fail is dryness, so the free fix is to wet the old surface thoroughly before you touch it with any mix. Not a splash. A real soaking, until the old concrete stops drinking and stays dark and damp on the surface. Do that the night before if you can, and again an hour before you start. A damp surface can't steal the water out of your fresh mix. That one free step, done right, will do more for you than any $40 tub on the shelf. And curing. This is the other free secret they stopped teaching. After you patch or coat anything with cement, the worst thing you can do is let it dry fast in the air. Cement doesn't dry, it cures, and it needs moisture to keep curing for days. So, after your patch sets up, you cover it. A sheet of plastic laid over the top, a damp towel, anything that traps the moisture in. Keep it damp under that cover for 3 days if you can. And here's the number that stunned me. Research from university extension programs, the agricultural and engineering ones that test this for farmers pouring their own barn floors, shows that concrete kept properly moist while curing can end up more than 50% stronger than the same mix left to dry in open air. 50% for free, for doing nothing but laying a sheet of plastic over your work. I lost years of patches to that ignorance. I'd lay a nice repair, feel proud, and let it sit out in the dry air, and I was cutting its strength in half without knowing it. Nobody sold me plastic sheeting because there's no profit in telling a man to cover his work and wait. So there it is. For the folks who thought this wasn't for them, wet the old surface, bond it if you can, cover it and keep it damp for 3 days. No specialist, no expensive kit. Just the method our grandfathers used without thinking twice. And now you're probably feeling what I felt. A little bit of wonder and a little bit of anger. Wonder that it's this simple. Anger that it was kept this quiet. And that question, why was this kept so quiet, is exactly what drove me to go even deeper than a garage floor. If you're the kind of person who wants all of this in one place, the slurry formulas, the curing methods, the skim coat techniques, and the liquid glass application, I put everything I've dug up into a book called First Fixes, Deep Hacks, Full Stack Life. It's the reference I wish someone had handed me on that cold garage floor. You'll find it linked in the description below, and I think it'll change the way you see every worn surface in your home. But let's get back to the timeline, because what I found goes back further than most people expect. So let me tell you who benefited from the forgetting, because it's not a shadowy villain in a boardroom. It's simpler and sadder than that. Every step our grandfathers did for free became a product somebody could sell. The bond coat became a bottle of bonding agent. The knowledge of proper curing became unnecessary, because if your cheap patch fails in a year, well, you'll just come back and buy another tub, won't you? The whole business model of the modern repair aisle depends on you not knowing the free steps. A patch that lasts 30 years is a customer they only see once. A patch that fails every winter is a customer for life. I don't think anyone sat in a room and plotted it. I think it's worse than that. I think the knowledge just wasn't profitable to keep alive, so no one kept it alive. And it slipped through the cracks of one generation to the next until men like me were paying $40 to relearn what a bricklayer in 1824 already knew. But here's the thing about buried knowledge. It's never truly gone. Somebody always wrote it down. And that brings me to the single most valuable thing I found in all my digging. The thing I promised you at the start. Because everything I've told you so far makes your surface strong and bonded. But there was one more piece the old masters knew, a final step that turns ordinary crumbling concrete into a surface so hard and so sealed that dust can't rise off it and water can't soak into it. And it was written down more than 200 years ago. In the year 1818, a German chemist named Johann Nepomuk von Fuchs was working with a strange substance. When you cook common sand together with washing soda, you get a clear, syrupy liquid that dissolves in water and looks a bit like honey. Von Fuchs studied it, documented it, and gave it the name it still carries in the old books. He called it liquid glass. The chemists call it sodium silicate. And here is the miracle he uncovered, the thing that got buried under 2 centuries of newer, shinier products. When you brush watered-down liquid glass onto cured concrete, it soaks down into the pores of the surface. And there, deep inside the stone, it reacts with the leftover lime that every batch of cement contains. That reaction grows tiny, hard, glassy crystals right inside the concrete itself. It doesn't sit on top like a paint that will peel. It becomes part of the stone. It fills the pores from the inside and turns a soft, dusty, thirsty surface into something dense, sealed, and hard as glass. They used it to make dusty factory floors stop shedding powder. They used it to fireproof and waterproof. They used it to harden soft stone. And it's cheap. It's been sold for generations under the plain old name of water glass, and almost nobody in an ordinary home has any idea it exists. I'll tell you the day I understood what I'd found. I was reading through an old industrial handbook, the kind with the cloth cover and the tiny print, and there was the whole method laid out plain as day for hardening concrete floors, dated to work that traced right back to von Fuchs and his liquid glass from 1818. 200 years. 200 years that formula sat there, and I'd spent a small fortune on sealers in fancy cans that did a fraction of the job. So here's how you use it this weekend, because it truly is that simple. You buy sodium silicate, sold as liquid glass or concrete densifier, and a little goes a very long way. You thin it with water, roughly 1 part liquid glass to 3 or 4 parts water for a first coat. You make sure your concrete is clean and, this time, dry, because you want the liquid to soak in. You brush or spray it on evenly and let it drink it in. Where it soaks up fast and looks thirsty, you give it more. You keep any puddles moving with a brush so it doesn't dry into a white film on the surface. Then you let it cure, and the crystals grow inside for days. What you're left with is a floor, a step, a countertop, a garage that no longer coughs up dust when you sweep it, that shrugs off water, that resists stains and wear, and that will keep getting harder over time instead of falling apart. For a few dollars. Using a formula older than your great-great-grandfather, put it all together and you have the whole forgotten craft in your hands. You wet the old surface so it can't starve your work. You bond it with a cement and glue slurry so the new grips the old like one solid piece. You cover it and keep it damp so it cures to full strength. And then you seal it forever with the liquid glass von Fuchs wrote down in 1818. 4 steps. Almost no money. A result that outlasts everything on the store shelf. I think about the man I was on that garage floor, scraping up flakes, blaming myself, $40 poorer and about to spend 40 more. If someone had handed him these 4 steps, he'd have saved years of frustration and a drawer full of failed products. Nobody did, so I'm handing them to you. Because this was never really about concrete. It's about the quiet theft that happens when a simple, powerful thing gets replaced by an expensive, weak one, and a whole generation forgets there was ever another way. You just took a piece of that back. It was always yours. If you're the kind of person who believes the old methods often beat the new ones, who'd rather understand a thing than keep buying a fix for it, then you already belong here. This is what we do. We dig up what got buried and we put it back in ordinary hands. Now I want to hear from you. Tell me this. Which surface in your home are you going to try this on first? The garage floor, an old step, or a countertop you've been ashamed of for years? And here's the one I'm really curious about. Have you ever heard of liquid glass before today, or is this the first time? Tell me in the comments. Say yes if it's brand new to you, because I have a feeling almost every one of you will. And if you want the next secret, stay close. Because there's an old lime-based finish, the kind they put on farmhouse walls a century ago, that kills mold and cleans the air in a room without a single chemical. And I found the recipe in a document even older than von Fuchs. I'll show you that one next. Follow along. And let's keep bringing this knowledge back where it belongs, one forgotten formula at a time. Let me go back for a moment, because I skipped past something you need to hear before you pick up that brush this weekend, and it's the mistake that ruins more first attempts than anything else. When I did my very first bonding slurry, I got greedy. I mixed a big batch, brushed it all over the whole area, and then went to get my patch material. By the time I came back, the slurry had already dried. Dull, not shiny. And a dried slurry is worse than no slurry at all, because now you've just added another dusty, dry layer for your patch to fail against. The rule I learned the hard way is this: the slurry only works while it's wet and tacky and shining. So you work in small sections, you brush on slurry over an area no bigger than you can patch in the next few minutes, and you press your fresh mix into it while it still gleams. Then you move to the next section. Wet bond coat, fresh mix on top, wet on wet every time. That's the whole discipline of it, and once you feel it work, you'll never forget it. The old masons had a saying for this kind of work. They said you butter the wall. Just like buttering bread while it's soft, not after it's gone stale. That image stuck with me, and it's exactly right. You're buttering the old surface so the new coat sticks. And let me tell you what this does to how you see your own home, because this is the part I didn't expect. Once you know you can bond, coat, and seal almost any surface for a few dollars, you stop looking at worn things as garbage. That stained concrete porch isn't something to be embarrassed about and eventually pay thousands to tear out. It's a weekend and a bag of cement away from looking like poured stone. That rusty metal patio table your spouse wants to throw away can be bonded and skimmed into something that looks like carved granite. The ugly becomes the raw material for something better. I started walking through my own house differently. Instead of a list of things I couldn't afford to replace, I saw a list of things I could transform. That's a feeling I hadn't had in years, and it didn't come from money. It came from knowing. There's a number that stays with me from all this. The average homeowner will spend hundreds, sometimes over $1,000, to have a single small concrete area professionally resurfaced. I've seen the quotes. And the crew that shows up will do exactly what I just described to you. They'll clean it, they'll bond it, they'll skim it, and they'll seal it. The materials in their truck cost a small fraction of what they charge, and the knowledge in their heads is the same knowledge that used to live in every household before we handed it away. I'm not saying there's never a reason to hire a professional. For a big structural job, you call someone who knows what they're doing. But for the everyday repair, the tired step, the dusty garage, the ugly counter, you are fully capable of doing what our grandfathers did without a second thought. The only thing standing between you and that was the knowing, and now you have it. Let me leave you with one more thought about the liquid glass, because it's the piece I keep coming back to. Von Fuchs wrote about it in 1818. That's 6 years before Portland cement itself was even patented. Think about that. The sealer is older than the cement it seals. The knowledge was there before the problem was fully invented, waiting in a chemist's notebook for anyone who cared to look. And for 200 years, most of us walked right past it, buying can after can of something weaker and calling it progress. That's the real lesson under all of this. Newer is not the same as better. Convenient is not the same as good. And a lot of what got sold to us as an improvement was really just a way to make us forget how much we already knew. So this weekend, wet the surface, butter it with the bonding slurry, press your work in while it shines, cover it and keep it damp for 3 days. And when it's cured hard, brush on the liquid glass and watch a soft, dusty, tired surface turn to stone that dust can't rise from and water can't soak into. $5, 4 steps. 200 years of forgotten craft, back in your hands where it always belonged. And the next time someone stands in your kitchen and asks what beautiful counter came from, you can smile and tell them the truth. It came from a bag, a brush, and a piece of knowledge somebody tried very hard to make you forget. Before you go, one thing. This video gave you the overview, but there's more. Inside the Timeless Ways circle, I pick up right where we stopped. You can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You'd belong among practical folks like you already inside. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel anytime with one click.